Senior year was supposed to be easy. That's what everyone tells you, right? Take your required classes, coast through electives, and spend the rest of the time figuring out what college you're going to. For me, though, senior year meant AP Chemistry, which was kicking my ass from day one. I'm not a science person. I'm decent at math, good at English, but chemistry just didn't make sense to me. The formulas, the equations, the way everything built on everything else. By October, I was pulling a low C, and my teacher, Mr. Hendricks, pulled me aside after class one day and told me if I didn't get my grade up, I'd be looking at summer school. That's when I met Marcus. He was in my chem class, but sat on the other side of the room. Quiet guy, always took notes, never raised his hand, but clearly knew his stuff. After Mr. Hendricks embarrassed me in front of everyone, Marcus approached me in the hallway and offered to help me study. I was surprised because we'd never really talked before, but I wasn't about to turn down help from someone who actually understood this stuff. We exchanged numbers and agreed to meet at the library after school that Friday. The first study session was fine. We sat at one of the tables in the back corner where nobody really goes, and he walked me through the material I'd been struggling with. He was patient, didn't make me feel stupid, and by the end of the hour, I actually felt like I understood what was happening in class. We started meeting twice a week, always Tuesdays and Fridays, always at the same table in the back of the library. My grades started improving. I went from a C to a B- in about 3 weeks. My parents were thrilled. Mr. Hendricks seemed impressed, and I felt like I was finally getting a handle on things. But then Marcus started getting weird. It was small stuff at first. He'd make comments about things I hadn't told him. Like one day he mentioned that I'd gotten coffee before school, and I asked how he knew that. He said he saw me at the Starbucks near campus, but I didn't remember seeing him there. Another time he brought up something my friend had posted on Instagram, but I was pretty sure he didn't follow her. I started noticing him more around school, not just in chemistry class, but in the hallways between periods, in the cafeteria, standing near my locker. It felt like every time I turned around, he was there. And when I'd catch his eye, he'd just smile and wave like everything was normal. One Tuesday in November, I showed up to our study session, and he had printed out a stack of papers. He slid them across the table to me and said he'd made a custom study guide based on what I was struggling with. I flipped through it, and it was incredibly detailed, like scary detailed. It had notes on every concept we'd covered, practice problems, even annotations in the margins. I thanked him, but I was starting to feel uncomfortable. This was way more effort than anyone would put into helping someone they barely knew. That's when he said, "I just want to make sure you do well. I care about you." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Not because it was aggressive or creepy in an obvious way, but because it felt too personal. We weren't friends. We were study partners. That was it. I started making excuses to skip our sessions. I told him I had other stuff going on, that I needed to focus on my other classes. He'd text me every day asking when we could meet again. I'd give vague responses or just not answer. Then one night, I was at home doing homework in my room when I got a text from him. It was a picture of my house, taken from across the street. The caption just said, "Studying hard?" I felt my stomach drop. I went to my window and looked outside, but I didn't see anyone. I texted back asking what the hell he was doing, and he responded saying he was just in the neighborhood and thought it was funny that we both lived so close. I'd never told him where I lived. I blocked his number immediately and told my parents. They wanted to call the school, but I convinced them not to because I didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it already was. I figured if I just ignored him, he'd get the hint and leave me alone, but he didn't. He started leaving notes in my locker. Not threatening notes, just weird ones. Things like, "I miss our study sessions," and "You're doing so well in class because of me." I'd throw them away and pretend they didn't bother me, but they did. Then one day, I was walking to my car after school, and I saw him standing next to it. He was leaning against the driver's side door, arms crossed, smiling at me. I stopped walking. We were in the student parking lot, so there were other people around, but not many. Most people had already left. He said, "We need to talk." I told him we didn't need to talk about anything, and that he needed to leave me alone. He laughed like I'd said something funny, and said I was overreacting, that he was just trying to be a good friend. I told him we weren't friends. that he needed to stop texting me, stop leaving notes, and stop following me. My voice was shaking, but I tried to sound firm. His smile faded. He pushed off my car and took a step towards me. He said, "After everything I did for you, I'm the reason you're passing that class. You owe me." I didn't wait to hear what else he had to say. I turned around and walked back towards the school building as fast as I could without running. I could hear him calling my name behind me, but I didn't look back. I went straight to the office and told them what was happening. They called my parents, and my parents called the police. The school pulled Marcus in and talked to him, and apparently he denied everything, said I was making it up because I was mad at him for some reason. But then they checked the security cameras. They found footage of him following me through the hallways multiple times, standing outside my classes, waiting by my locker. The photo he'd sent me of my house was on his phone, along with a bunch of other photos of me that I didn't know he'd taken. At school, in the parking lot, through the window of the coffee shop. The school suspended him, and eventually he was expelled after his parents couldn't explain away the evidence. They tried to say he had a crush and didn't know how to express it, that he wasn't dangerous, just socially awkward. But I saw the way he looked at me that day in the parking lot. That wasn't awkward, that was something else. I ended up finishing the semester with a B in chemistry. I didn't need his help after all, but I still think about him sometimes. About how he knew where I lived, how he'd been watching me for who knows how long before I even noticed. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd kept meeting him at the library, if I hadn't blocked his number, if I hadn't told anyone. I'm in college now, and I still check over my shoulder more than I should. I still get anxious when I see someone standing too close to my car, and I never, ever study alone with someone I don't know well. Every high school has those stupid senior year traditions. Ditch day, prank day, all that stuff that's supposed to make your last few months memorable. At my school, one of the traditions was that the yearbook staff would sneak candid photos of seniors throughout the year and put together this special senior memories section. I was on the yearbook committee, not because I was particularly into photography or design, but because I needed an elective credit and my guidance counselor suggested it. It was supposed to be easy. Show up to meetings, help organize photos, maybe write a few captions. That's it. Our faculty advisor was Mrs. Chen, and she'd been running the yearbook for like 20 years. She was one of those teachers who cared way too much about traditions and school spirit. She took the yearbook seriously, which meant we took it seriously too, or at least pretended to. In September, she gave us our assignments for the year. Some people were in charge of sports photos, some did clubs, and a few of us were assigned to the senior candids. My job was to collect photos from other students and organize them into the memory section. People would submit photos through a shared Google Drive folder that Mrs. Chen had set up. Throughout the fall, students would upload pictures from football games, parties, class trips, whatever. Most of it was normal stuff. Groups of friends making stupid faces, people at their lockers, someone sleeping in study hall. But sometime in late October, weird photos started showing up in the folder. The first one I noticed was a picture of a girl named Sarah from my English class. She was walking through the hallway, but the photo was taken from behind and the angle was low, like someone had been crouching. It wasn't a good photo. It was blurry and she wasn't even facing the camera. I figured someone had submitted it by mistake. I deleted it and moved on. A few days later, there were more. Photos of different seniors, all taken from weird angles. Some from across the cafeteria with a zoom lens, some through classroom windows from outside, some in the parking lot. None of them were the kind of candid shots we'd use. They all felt wrong somehow, like surveillance photos rather than memories. I mentioned it to Mrs. Chen, and she said students probably thought they were being artistic or edgy. She told me to just delete anything that didn't fit the theme and not worry about it, but they kept coming. Every few days, new photos would appear in the folder, and they were getting more specific. I started recognizing patterns. The same students photographed multiple times, always when they were alone, always from a distance. Then, I found one of myself. It was taken outside the coffee shop I went to every morning before school. I was getting out of my car, holding my bag, mid-step. The photo was taken from across the parking lot. I hadn't noticed anyone with a camera that morning. I hadn't noticed anyone watching me at all. I felt my stomach twist. I immediately checked the file details to see who uploaded it, but the folder was set up so that anyone could submit anonymously. There was no way to tell who'd taken the photo. I deleted it, but my hands were shaking. The next day, I told the other yearbook committee members about what I'd been finding. Most of them had noticed the weird photos too, but hadn't thought much of it. We agreed to start paying closer attention to what was being uploaded. That's when things escalated. Someone started uploading photos taken inside people's houses, through windows. I'm not talking about party photos or pictures someone took of their friends hanging out. These were photos of students in their bedrooms, doing homework, getting ready for bed, just existing in private spaces. One photo showed a guy named Tyler sitting at his desk with his back to the window. Another showed a girl named Madison in her kitchen making food. The photos were all taken from outside, at night when the lights were on inside and it was dark outside. We brought it to Mrs. Chen immediately, and this time she couldn't brush it off. She looked at the photos and her face went pale. She said we needed to report this to the principal. The principal got the police involved. They pulled all the photos from the folder and started investigating. They interviewed students, checked security footage, tried to figure out who had access to the folder and when the photos had been uploaded, but they couldn't find anything. The uploads had all been done from different IP addresses, some from school computers, some from public Wi-Fi spots around town. Whoever was doing this knew how to cover their tracks. The weirdest part was that the photos kept coming even after the investigation started. Whoever was taking them didn't care that people knew, or maybe they wanted people to know. I started feeling paranoid. I'd check my windows at night to make sure the curtains were closed. I'd look around parking lots before getting out of my car. I felt like I was being watched constantly, even when I logically knew I probably wasn't. Then, about a week before winter break, I was at home in my room when I got a notification that someone had uploaded new photos to the folder. Mrs. Chen had supposedly locked it so no one could submit anything new, but somehow someone had gotten around that. I opened the folder on my laptop. There were 3 new photos, all of me. One taken outside my house that morning, one in the school hallway between classes, and one that made me feel like I was going to throw up. It was a photo of me sitting in my room at my desk, taken from outside my window. That night, maybe 5 minutes earlier. I ran to my window and looked out. My bedroom faces the backyard, and beyond that is a line of trees. It was too dark to see anything clearly, but I thought I saw movement near the tree line. I called 911. I told them someone had been taking photos of me and that they might still be outside my house. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until officers arrived. They searched the backyard and the woods behind my house. They found footprints in the mud near the trees and some broken branches, like someone had been standing there for a while. But whoever it was had already left. The police took my laptop and pulled all the photos from the folder as evidence. They said they'd do everything they could to find whoever was doing this, but they never did. The photos stopped after that night. The yearbook committee was dissolved and Mrs. Chen retired at the end of the year. The school tried to pretend the whole thing never happened, like if they didn't talk about it, it would just go away. I graduated in June and left for college in August. I haven't been back home much since then, but sometimes, late at night, I still think about those photos, about how someone had been watching me, watching all of us for months, how they knew where we lived, where we went, what we did. And I think about the fact that they never got caught, that they're still out there somewhere. Maybe they moved on to a different school. Maybe they stopped. Or maybe they're still watching, still taking photos, still waiting for the right moment. Every school has a place students aren't supposed to go. At my high school, it was the basement. It wasn't officially off limits or anything. There just wasn't any reason to go down there. The basement was where they kept old textbooks, broken equipment, and maintenance stuff. The door was in a hallway near the science wing, and it was always locked. Most students didn't even know it existed. I found out about it during my junior year because I was a TA for Mr. Morrison, one of the science teachers. Part of my job was helping him set up labs and organizing supplies. One day, he asked me to grab some old beakers from storage, and he handed me a key to the basement door. I'd walked past that door hundreds of times and never thought twice about it, but when I opened it and saw the stairs going down into darkness, I hesitated. The stairwell smelled like mold and dust, and the light switch at the top didn't work. Mr. Morrison told me the storage room was at the bottom of the stairs, first door on the left. He said the light down there worked, I just had to find the pull string once I got down. I used my phone flashlight and went down. The stairs were concrete and steep, and they creaked under my weight, even though they were solid. At the bottom was a hallway with a few doors. I found the storage room, pulled the string to turn on the light, and grabbed the beakers. The whole thing took maybe 5 minutes, but it felt longer. The basement was completely silent in a way that felt wrong, like the kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. I didn't think much about it after that. I went down a few more times throughout the semester when Mr. Morrison needed supplies, and it was always the same. Quiet, dark, uncomfortable, but nothing actually scary. Then at the start of senior year, something changed. I went down to grab some materials for a lab, and when I got to the bottom of the stairs, I noticed one of the other doors in the hallway was open. Not wide open, just cracked, like someone had left it that way. I'd never seen any of the other doors open before. I walked over and pushed it open a little more, shining my phone light inside. It was a small room, empty except for some old chairs stacked in the corner and a filing cabinet against the wall. Nothing weird, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been down there recently. The air felt different, less stale. I grabbed what I needed from the storage room and left. When I got back upstairs, I asked Mr. Morrison if anyone else had been down there that day. He said no, that I was the only student with a key, and maintenance only went down there maybe once a month. A few days later, I had to go back down. This time, the door that had been cracked open was fully closed, but a different door was open. Same deal, just slightly ajar. I started paying closer attention after that. Every time I went down, a different door would be open. It was like someone was moving through the basement, going into rooms and leaving doors cracked behind them. I mentioned it to Mr. Morrison again, and he seemed annoyed. He said I was probably just not remembering which doors were open and that I was overthinking it. He told me to stop worrying about it and just get what I needed, but I wasn't imagining it. I started taking pictures every time I went down, documenting which doors were open and which were closed. The pattern was clear. Someone was down there. Then, in October, I went down to grab some test tubes, and I heard something. It was faint, coming from deeper in the basement, past the storage room. It sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps moving across a concrete floor. I froze at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The footsteps stopped, then they started again, closer this time. I didn't wait to see who it was. I ran back up the stairs, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the key. I told Mr. Morrison someone was in the basement. He didn't believe me at first, but I was so insistent that he finally agreed to go down and check. We went down together. He had a flashlight, and we walked through the entire basement, opening every door, checking every room. There was nobody there. No sign anyone had been there recently. He told me I'd probably heard the building settling or pipes making noise. Old buildings sound weird, he said. I wanted to believe him, but I knew what I'd heard. I stopped going down to the basement after that. When Mr. Morrison needed something, I'd make an excuse or offer to do something else instead. He eventually stopped asking, but other people started talking about the basement. Not a lot of people, just a few students who'd heard rumors. Someone said they'd seen a person walking up the basement stairs after school when the building was supposed to be empty. Someone else said they'd heard voices coming from behind the basement door. Then, in November, a freshman named Kyle went missing. He didn't show up to school one day, and when his parents called, they said he'd left for school that morning like normal. The police got involved, searched the school, checked the security footage. The footage showed Kyle entering the building that morning, but it never showed him leaving. He'd just vanished somewhere inside. They searched everywhere. Every classroom, every bathroom, the gym, the cafeteria. They even searched the basement. They didn't find him. 3 days later, Kyle showed up at school like nothing had happened. He walked into first period late, sat down, and when the teacher asked where he'd been, he said he didn't know. The school called his parents, who took him to the hospital. Physically, he was fine, but he couldn't remember anything from the past 3 days. The last thing he remembered was walking into the school building that Monday morning. The police questioned him, but he had no answers. He didn't know where he'd been or what had happened. He just remembered waking up in his bed that morning and going to school like normal. People started saying he'd been in the basement, that someone had taken him down there and kept him for 3 days, but there was no evidence. No proof, just a kid who'd lost 3 days of his life and couldn't explain why. After that, the school sealed the basement door. They said it was for safety reasons and that students were no longer allowed down there under any circumstances. I graduated that spring and left for college, but I still think about that basement sometimes, about the doors that kept opening, about the footsteps I heard, about Kyle and those missing 3 days. And I think about the fact that they sealed the door but didn't explain why, like they found something down there, something they didn't want anyone to know about. I don't know what was in that basement, but I'm glad I stopped going down there when I did, because I have a feeling if I'd stayed just a little bit longer that day, if I'd followed those footsteps instead of running, I might have found out, and I don't think I would have come back up.